Riot's announcement of Unleashed, they stated that at the heart of Riftbound's third set would be the single unifying idea: power strikes from the shadows. So after 4 pre-rift events and 6 lore episodes, let's see if it holds up. Welcome to Runeterra Tourist. I'm Patrick, and happy Unleashed set release day to all who celebrate. Today we're going to do another something a little different. We're going to take a look at what Unleashed actually is thematically, the legends Riot brought to the table, how the set actually feels to play, and whether Riot delivered on what they sought to accomplish with the set Unleashed. It's taking every ounce of energy in me to not make any Guns N' Roses references, so let's dive in before I make that mistake. In Riot's official Unleashed overview, they state that the jungle is a living force. It sees you before you see it. Sounds a little AI. Anyway, it rewards patience, punishes arrogance, and belongs to those who know how to move through it without being seen. At the heart of Riftbound's third set is a single unifying idea: power strikes from the shadows. Ooh. Riot frames this around champions like Master Yi, Diana, Vi, and Pyke, each having walked a solitary path shaped not in the spotlight but in silence. Ooh, mysterious. And the set is described about becoming champions who grow, evolve, and strike when the moment is right. It's worth noting that there are keywords in the set that do emphasize the overall mission statement that they had for Unleashed. We have the XP mechanic that is the mechanical expression of being able to develop as the game progresses. We have the ambush keyword that explicitly is described as replicating the core skill of a jungler, being able to attack from concealment at just the right moment. So there are a couple of thematic positives here with this set. For viewers like me who've never played League, I had to do a little bit of research as to what jungling even was. And as you would imagine, the jungle is this forested space in between the lanes full of neutral monster camps. And so a jungler typically farms those camps for resources and experience, and generally assists and influences those lanes, typically by ambushing enemy players from unexpected angles, which they call ganking. Should sound a little familiar to us already. So it's all about patience, positioning, and timing, and striking when your opponent doesn't see you coming. So which of the 12 legends actually are junglers? Well, this is where it gets interesting, because Riot's jungle framing applies cleanly to some and is a little bit more loosely applied to others, and some not even at all. We've got Master Yi, who is the iconic jungler, running through an entire enemy team. We've got Kha'Zix, who's the assassin jungler, isolating targets, evolving, lather, rinse, repeat. Rengar, who is definitely the ambush jungler that you can see through his signature spell, leaping from the brush, maximizing single target bursts. Ivern is a uniquely pacifist jungler, doesn't kill the camps per se, but instead harvests them, growing his own brush. And Lilia, the jungler who builds speed through the jungle and puts enemies to sleep. There are others who I guess could be considered junglers, but it's really situational at best. Vi is occasionally one, but she's really fundamentally a brawler, if anything, and her story has nothing to do with any jungle. And Vex supposedly could be, but really she's primarily a mid-lane mage. So very loose applications. Meanwhile, you have the other 5 who are very much not junglers. Diana and LeBlanc are mid-lane mages themselves. Jhin is a bottom lane marksman. Pyke is more of a support champion, and Poppy is a top lane tank. The Riot's own jungle framing really only cleanly applies to 4, maybe 5 of the champions. And so this seems to be more of Riot's expression of the jungling as a metaphor, striking when the moment presents itself, lurking in the dark with the ambush abilities, rather than a literal descriptor. And so this feels more like a marketing tactic from Riot, getting these legends out that are a little bit more popular with players. We got Vi, who's very recognizable because of Arcane, Jhin, who is one of the more popular villains, so is LeBlanc. So this seems to be more of Riot's attempt to get these legends out as quickly as possible for the masses. Then we've got the Kha'Zix and Rengar question here of why are they in this set when a future set is coming up called Vendetta? I mean, that is one that's literally about rivalries, and we have one of the biggest ones already presented in this set. So releasing them both now is an interesting choice by Riot. Maybe their mechanics really embody what they're trying to achieve with Unleashed, and there are new mechanisms that are going to be in Vendetta that they may not be better suited for. Because of the roster that we're aware of so far for Vendetta, Akali, Mbessa, Mel, Shen, and Zed, possibly Nasus and Renekton. I hope I'm saying that right. Probably not. But knowing that those are the possibilities for the next set, perhaps these two don't really fit into that very clearly. We've got a lot of Ionian and Noxian connections there, and these two don't really make that connection very easily. But if we think about it, there are actually a lot of alternatives that they could have used in place of some of these other legends. Take Warwick, for example, the Zaun jungler, deeply connected to Arcane. He is Vander, the man who raised Vi, and if they're really spreading out the notable Arcane characters, he could have easily replaced LeBlanc. And we already have a Warwick champion unit in Origin, so this would have slotted in pretty easily. Plus, like I said, with the Arcane and Vi connections, it seemed like a pretty obvious choice. Evelyn, the demon who seduces and consumes her victims, invisible until she strikes. This is probably perhaps the most literal interpretation of the whole power strikes from the shadows thing. I mean, she kind of does, right? But oddly enough, she has a champion unit card in Unleashed, just not any legend. Apparently, there's a possibility that she'll be in the Radiance set. Maybe that's why they're saving her for that. Even then, she could have replaced one of these other legends easily. Nidalee is the shapeshifter raised by jungle cats in the wilderness between Ixtal and Shurima, and lives entirely in the jungle, hunts trespassers, sets traps. That feels like the perfect embodiment of a legend for this Unleashed jungle theme. She clearly has one of the most literal jungle native stories, and even though she does have a champion unit in this set, I feel like it would have been easy to slot her in as one of the legends. Another one with a card from Origins, Nocturne, is a nightmare given form, a terror that lurks in the shadow realms and strikes from the darkness. And I think that he would have fit even better with the whole power strikes in the shadows aspect, framing it a little bit more literally per se, but I feel like his League of Legends gameplay is built around global ambushes. Perhaps it's because we have another legend who defeats isolated enemies in Kha'Zix, but I still feel like Nocturne could have slotted in here. Finally, a champion yet without a card. Hecarim is a spectral warlord fused with his cavalry and their mounts by the Ruined Nation. There's a rich connected lore here between Callista, Viego, and the Black Mist. Perhaps they're saving this for later sets when those legends get revealed. But mechanically, a charging momentum-based jungler could have been pretty fun for this set too. In addition, it would cover another region that we haven't really seen in this set yet, one that's heavily focused on the Ionian side. I participated in 4 pre-Rift events already, getting a pretty good feel about what the set encompasses, so I kind of like to discuss how the set feels mechanically and also thematically. Riftbound executive producer Chen Gran-Chai has said plainly what success looks like for Riftbound. When all the League fans know about Riftbound and they want Riftbound cards, they are playing the game in their own way, whether that is socially, competitively, or just collecting. They're able to express their fandom for the League and genuinely making connections with each other and having fun through Riftbound. I think that is success. He also articulated his social philosophy, stating that games are supposed to be fun, and sometimes games can get a little sweaty to the point where they're no longer fun. And so even though he says he's a very competitive player, his focus is to just have fun sometimes, and it's okay to lose. I know that's hard for a lot of us to hear, especially somebody who's competitive myself, but I think that generally is well implemented in this game. The pre-Rift sealed format specifically creates that social texture that Chai was describing. It's a more forgiving format than Constructed, way more laid back and social, but everybody's on an even playing field given that they're only playing cards from the same set. And it's friendly enough that there's a natural post-game conversation that happens. People would angle for the legends that they love or were disappointed if they didn't open those in their packs. But the champion identity was the entry point, which is explicitly what Chai had described. Gameplay-wise, the jungle theming of patience and striking when the timing is right really came through with this set, and there's new strategies that developed around it. through the ambush mechanic and the combat tricks that you could play against your opponent, Unleashed opened up some new strategies, and players needed to be ready to adapt. But in general, they were just fun social events. Everybody was extremely excited to get their hands on these new cards, try them out for themselves. There was a lot of trading and ripping of packs and angling to get the signature spell or the legend that they were shooting for, hoping to build around for this coming meta. And so I think that created that dynamic that you don't often see in a lot of other TCGs. It's quite a unique experience that I had on my own with this pre-Rift event, given that I had one friend who literally played it on the Sunday before pre-Rifts began and started to sign up as soon as he found a free one that I joined him on. Another who was playing Commander predominantly and noted a lot of the similarities between those mechanics and the political aspect you could have here in a 4-player game with this game, as well as some of the mechanics that were way simpler yet still strategically deep than other card games I won't name. And then a third friend who's been watching my IG posts, who was a longtime League player, now suddenly piquing his interest again to get back into this IP. Planning on playing a couple of games with him too, just to get another one roped. All that to say, with 3 different entry points, 4 if you count my own, we all somehow managed to find our way to this game at this table. And I think that speaks a lot to Riftbound itself and the unifying effect that the game in general has, but this set really unlocks with a lot of competitive players who just want something different. Chai's clearest statement of intent with Riftbound was indicating that while the League IP would be the initial hook that would draw a huge swath of players in, it had to be the strategic depth to their 1v1 gameplay that would really resonate with these players. And I think he accomplished that, given the fact that the social aspect was such a large focus in developing this game, but also still finding ways to keep it competitive. This largely came off the back of Legends of Runeterra, which by most accounts was genuinely a good card game. It was strategically deep, it was beloved by its community, but it failed mostly because of the monetization aspect. It was so generous that it could not sustain itself, and so while it tried to aim to be nice to the free-to-play players, they could build competitive decks without really having to invest a lot of money into it. Not exactly the best strategy long-term for many TCGs, digital or paper. Chai even acknowledged that, indicating that the TCG model is very well established as is, so there's no need to deviate from such a proven model unless there's an absolute need for innovation. But one of the biggest design lessons that Chai notes in making Legends of Runeterra was the fact that when you made a deck, it wasn't actually about the champions themselves. The identity was a little bit weaker than he liked, and so he wanted to make sure that Riftbound fully encompassed the impact that a single legend had. Considering that a lot of League players would main one legend, sometimes 2, he wanted to recreate that personal connection with each legend. While it's completely understandable that the Legends of Runeterra players feel genuinely hurt by Riot's departure from that game building a TCG, I would argue that at least Riot learned from their mistakes in crafting Riftbound, and we can only hope that from those lessons they build a much more sustainable product and put the same kind of love that they did into LOR into this game. Some of the growing pains we've already seen in Riftbound is Riot's discovery that you can't just patch a physical product like a TCG as you could with your video games. There were a lot of hiccups in the production and availability of their product, and so Riot learned that they have to develop everything simultaneously and in parallel. I think that speaks a lot to some of the online chatter wondering about certain mechanics or overpowering of certain domains, and it seems that Riot is preparing themselves for an answer to those. It's just that we're not going to see them for several sets. However, rather than seeing emergency erratas, we're seeing ban lists that are happening early enough into the game's life, indicating Riot's intention on what they want out of this game, what they expect the players to enjoy out of this game, and recognizing what they wanted to put forth. It's extremely promising and not something that many TCGs do, but the successful ones do. and it's meaningful understanding their own design constraint and putting that into practice. So in regards to Unleashed, while they may not have perfectly framed the jungle aspect into every single cards of the set, I feel like it was more metaphorical than literal anyway, and some of the champions, while they feel like they are just filling a roster, they still are going to be pretty impactful in this upcoming meta, like LeBlanc, Diana. I think it's going to be really cool to see how they weave themselves into the already established aggressive meta. Same thing with Vex, going with the hold strategy. Maybe that brings Ari back into the picture too. So I think this really develops new strategies and tactics and could create a very fun meta to be a part of. But the core promise of putting champions front and center, as well as a strong social texture, and making a game that's accessible not just to TCG veterans, but new players, I think that this is an emotionally resonant and competitive game that will really speak volumes going forward. If you're a longtime League player or a TCG player who's been watching from the outside, or I guess I should say lurking from the brush, now's a good time as any to get entry into this game. So check your local game store if they have any events upcoming. There's also a UVS website with their events. I'll make sure to put that in the description below, where you can go and check out the game on your local Nexus nights. But for those who have played Unleashed, what did they get right? And what did they miss? Let me know in the comments below on what your opinions are of the set so far. New episodes are due to drop every week, and I'll return to my regularly scheduled programming of the deep dive into lore now that the set has been unleashed. Sorry, I couldn't help myself with that one. But subscribe if that's your thing. But until next time, thank you for watching.